I'm super duper nervous. I apologize in advance. At this date, a great man died. It was Douglas C. Engelbart. He was the inventor of the computer mouse as we use it nowadays. This was his first prototype. And at this date, I was always doing an internship at the local company. And one developer suggested to introduce the mouse-free day at 2nd of July as some kind of tribute to him and his invention, of course. And so we all did. And at that day, I learned 3 things. First of all, mouse-free days are pretty much the best possibility to learn new shortcuts. Sometimes you're really stuck, so use a cheat sheet. Print it out first, otherwise it would be Control-P or Alt-P. Depends on which operating system you are. Secondly, it is shocking how often we as developers are forced to reposition the caret while we code. And lastly, that day wasn't that unproductive at all, as you might expect, but probably because it's pretty hard to do other things than code. For example, go to YouTube. It's not that easy to navigate through it. So that's the history or the story behind the title of the talk, Stop Clicking and Be Productive. I will also introduce the template-based Postfix Code Completion in Eclipse JDT. Before we start, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Nicolas Höss. People usually call me Nico. I'm currently a student, a master's student at the University of Applied Sciences in Vorarlberg. And I recently finished my bachelor thesis, or my bachelor exam. And one of my 2 bachelor theses was about analyzing and implementing coding assistance techniques in Eclipse JDT. By the way, my feelings for Eclipse are much deeper than I like Eclipse, I love Eclipse. I'm an Eclipse user since more than 10 years. Yeah, let's start. Initially, I mentioned it is shocking how often we are unintentionally forced to reposition the caret. The first example is, hopefully you are all using Code Recommenders. Code Recommenders is a great tool. It's Eclipse exclusive. This makes it even greater. What it basically does, you can access an object. Code Recommenders will suggest what you should do next with that object. So it suggests, yeah, use is empty. So we do. Now what? We should use, of course, the return value of that method. How are we supposed to complete this scenario if we would like to assign it to a new variable? We would click to the beginning of the line. We might guess the return type of that method right, so we type Boolean and declare the variable. We click to the end of the line, semicolon, and we're done. Some more experienced users, like Lars, will say, yeah, there's a shortcut for that. It's Control-L for assigning it to a local variable. It's Control-F for assigning to a new field. However, what if I would like to take this return type or return value and wrap it into an if statement, which makes probably more sense in this case. There's no shortcut for that. What if I would like to take this expression and wrap it into a for statement if it resolves to a collection, of course? There's no shortcut for that. If there would be, it would require a lot of mouse-free days to remember them all. Second example. For those of you who use test-driven development, this should be familiar to you. Basically, test-driven development is you write the test first, taking into account that you produce a lot of syntax errors, you use classes which don't even exist yet, you use methods which don't even exist yet, and subsequently you end up in scenarios like this. So an empty class, empty constructor, and a parameter. Usually we would like to assign a field out of this parameter. So how are we supposed to complete the scenario? We click into the members area of the class, we declare the field, we click back to the constructor body, we assign the field. What about the shortcut Control-F? It's not working here. Control-F only works for expressions, it does not work for variables. There is another possibility how to use shortcuts in this scenario. It's the same thing as Control-2. This leads to the question, why should we even care about that? Sometimes we have shortcuts, sometimes we can use your mouse. That can't be that time costly. Actually, it can. In my bachelor thesis, I evaluated such scenarios using KLM. KLM is, or it's keystroke level model. It was invented by David E. Kiras in 1993. It is pretty old, but still considered to be valid. What KLM basically does, it divides a scenario in human-computer interaction into its atomic operations, and then you assign time values for each atomic operation, and then you sum these values up, and this is an estimate completion time of a scenario. So according to KLM, moving your right hand from the keyboard to the mouse is about 400 milliseconds. Of course, that's a one-way ticket, so moving it back is another 400 milliseconds. A general term for mousing and keyboarding is, by the way, homing of your hand. Point the mouse is over a second. clicking the mouse is 100 milliseconds. So this altogether is the repositioning of a cursor. Usually, if we face such a scenario, we have to do that twice. Remember, first at the beginning of the line, then the end of the line. So we multiply this by 2. So we get 4 seconds for repositioning the cursor. And 4 seconds, according to KLM, is equivalent to more than 40 keystrokes. 40 keystrokes is equivalent to a code block or at least a very long statement. Some of you might think those values are not true for you because you're an advanced Counter-Strike player, your mouse aim is almost perfect, you're a StarCraft player, your clicking speed is close to a millisecond. This is your long-term average. So this includes days where you may be hungover and have a lot of mouse slips and misclicks. So this is true for the majority, so also for you. What about using shortcuts? Are they time-saving at all? Unfortunately, there is less research out there which exactly addresses this topic, so I did some empiric testing. And yeah, in the context of coding, of course, we are especially interested in those two operations. So hitting Control 2 in the context of coding and the succeeding keystroke F for assigning it to a new field. The median of all samples was over 3 seconds. So this is pretty time costly. There's other evidence why shortcuts are not a good solution to the general problem of using expressions in statements. It seems like that we have a limited shortcut memory. I did a survey at my university asking an informatics student, how many shortcuts do you know in your preferred IDE? It was mostly Eclipse. The others I didn't count. So, and the majority said that they do not know more than 7 to 10 shortcuts. So just introducing new shortcuts into the IDE to have a more general solution to the problem is not a good solution. Another evidence, the Apple Research Center did very expensive research on how appliance of a shortcut affect our brain. And they found out that if you're highly concentrated and you have to recall a shortcut to apply it, it ends in some amnesia of about 2 seconds. So basically your brain freezes, you're not concentrated anymore, you apply the shortcut, and you have to reconcentrate again. Don't get me wrong, shortcuts are time-saving. In another context, imagine you're doing code review, so usually you're not that concentrated. Your right hand is already positioned on the mouse or on the cursor keys, your left hand is in this gamer position, Shift, ASD in space. So you're perfectly fine to use shortcuts in this scenario. Use Control-V to delete the line without selecting it first. Use Control-Shift-C to toggle comments, or all the others. There's a full list on fogella.com. Yeah, check that out. It's pretty cool. The solution to the initial problem is Postfix Code Completion. As far as I know, I want to clearly state out, I'm not the inventor of this technique. As far as I know, it was initially implemented in JetBrains ReSharper, which is the C# IDE from JetBrains, and then migrated to IntelliJ early this year. And I was so rude and stole their demonstration animation and show it at an EclipseCon. What you basically can do, you can access an object, and you apply a Postfix Code Completion command, and in this case it was not null, and then it wraps this expression into an if statement. This also works for newly instantiated objects. We apply the throw command, and it wraps this into a throw statement. So this looks nice. Unfortunately, all those commands, it's more than 2, it's about 20, are hard-coded in the implementation. So each command is represented in the underlying implementation by one class which handles the type dependency of those commands. Those are type dependent, so we cannot apply the throw command, for example, in a Boolean expression. But it turned out that the community had pretty good ideas how to extend this list of commands. There is a string format, there is a try-catch or try-catch finally, or system out, postfix based, of course. But unfortunately, they have never been implemented because, of course, it requires developer power, which is considered to be expensive. So why not steal this idea and build it upon a template system of an IDE? That was my approach. First, I would like to introduce the template system. And some of you will be bored, but I did a survey also on, do you define your own templates? Only 10% said that they do define their own templates. Templates are so powerful, and highly underestimated. So just imagine it's Friday afternoon, it's 4 p.m., you're at work, you're highly motivated to introduce this new functionality in your project, but unfortunately it requires the implementation of a thread-safe singleton, you have to read out a text file, annoying tasks. Yeah, so we postponed it to later. I have to breathe a little bit, I'm sorry. We postponed this task to, we do that in 5 minutes. And to those of you who don't agree to that, this is psychologically proven human behavior. We tend to postpone tasks which are annoying. So every time you catch yourself behave like this, why not add a new template? So you find templates in your preferences, Java editor templates. You're welcome to create your own template, for example, a singleton template. What you see here is it's essentially Java code, but there are those weird things. Those are called template variables. There are a bunch of them. This template variable resolves at apply time to the name of the enclosing class. As I said, I'm super duper nervous. I'm so sorry. Let's see that in action. So templates are listed in the content assist. We can apply it, we're done. From 5 minutes and Googling and visiting Vogella and copy and paste a snippet, down to 1 second. What about a file reading template? Again, there are variables. Variables can also have parameters, so they define special resolving behavior. We can also assign names to variables. We can reuse those names and at a different place. We can define the cursor position. Again, let's use it. We can choose a string from a pop-up menu. We're done. That's cool. What about template-based postfix code completions? My approach was to implement, this is weird, to implement a new template context called Java postfix. Okay, it is in some way misplaced, the picture. This should be highlighted. Postfix, and you have some variables. This should be here. I'm sorry. Let's create our first postfix template. All those orange highlighted variables are existing variables of the Eclipse JDT implementation. All those green highlighted variables are newly implemented different expression. There's a new type variable which accepts a parameter, in this case the inner expression, which determines the type of the expression. That's all what you can do with this template. You access an object, is empty, we apply the template, it suggests a name based on this variable, but we can override this, we're done. This works on objects, it works on other variables, it works on plain values, even for complex types. So in all scenarios. What about a field template? It's a little bit less complex. We have this inner expression variable again. There's a new variable which is called new field. It creates a new field in the current scope. Again, we pass in the inner expression variable. We're done. Let's see. Constructor parameters. It's a base type. Of course, it works for expressions also. It works for plain values. What about the type dependency of specific templates? You can also specify types. For example, for the not null template, we would like to create an if statement of the expression, checking for not null. Of course, it does not make sense to check base types for null, so we prevent it. As you might guess, it traverses the whole type hierarchy of the expression, so it's enough to specify Java an object for complex types and arrays for all arrays, even for base types. And we can specify the cursor that after applying the template, it's within the if statement body. That's a string. That's an int array, and it's not working for a base type int. This is pretty cool, at least for assigning new fields. But for all the other scenarios, it's useless. This is a true story. This was stated out after my bachelor thesis presentation from a member of the examination committee. And he provided evidence for that. He said, in his opinion, he's a very fast typer or fast typist. saving 0 to 5 keystrokes per scenario is not worth learning this new concept. And this is a valid argument, but I disagree to that. Because we have to keep in mind that saving keystrokes is not the only aspect. There's a lot of discussion out there which is about how programmers think while they code. And the common opinion is that we face a big problem, we divide it into smaller problems, then we map our thoughts into code. So basically it's divide and conquer. This is a valid example. Now I need to get all participants of EclipseCon and do whatever. Hopefully this produces a code part like this. As we see, it's perfectly mappable into code. No additional thinking required. A more complex thought. Now I need to get all participants of EclipseCon and iterate over them to send them an invoice. I spoiled you, there's a missing part. We map the iterate to for, we map EclipseCon to EclipseCon, we map participants to participants. The missing part is the hard one. This could be, it could be a list of participants, the return value of that get participants method. It could be a list of person. If our software architect loves over abstraction, it could be a list of living creatures, it could be a list of geeks or whatever. So best case scenario, we know the underlying model, so we can recall it by a cognitive process. Worst case scenario, we don't know the model, we have to determine it in another task. Let's see how this works out with Postfix Code Completion. Again, iterate is mapped to for, EclipseCon is mapped to EclipseCon, participants is mapped to get participants. So no additional cognitive process needed here. Let's create a for template. Again, we have an inner expression, type dependency to iterable or array. There's a new variable, new actual type, which resolves to the generic type or the actual type of an array. We specify the cursor position. Works for expressions, get participants, .for. We can override the name, we are done. We can apply it on arrays. We are done. This is a more complex one. I would like to show it anyway, because it shows the power of Postfix Code Completion. As you see here, the new field variable accepts more than one parameter. Basically, we can specify, should it be public or private? Should it be static? Should it be final? Or whether we would like to initialize it directly. This no value flag it prevents the output of the inner expression variable. This is some kind of workaround because the grammar of templates in Eclipse does not allow nested template variables. So the obvious solution would be to take this variable and put it directly here. That's not possible. So this is some kind of workaround. Of course, we can also introduce a const pub template, which essentially creates a public constant. Let's see that in action. You can extract constants directly from your code. No additional mouse interaction needed, no shortcut needed. This should be familiar to Android developers, even though it's not sysout, it's log-d or something. Last example. What else? It turned out that this is a very powerful concept. I claim that more than 60K Java programmers, of course mostly beginners, do not know how to sort a list. We can use Postfix Code Completion to inject this sort method into the list interface, as you can see here, and it transforms the expression to the collection sort method call. It even works for sort comp. You have directly your comparator instantiated, and no additional unimplemented methods needed. How can you get it? There's for Luna Plus, there is an update site which works for Luna Plus, except for Mars. No, it's not tested. It's not tested there. I'm not sure if it works. There's also an update site for Juno 3.8. Some of you will appreciate that. Source code is published on GitHub. You can contribute to the initial bug ticket in the Eclipse bug tracker. It's 433-500. If you need support, use GitHub bug tracker or contact me via email. Maybe there is some delay between your question and my answer, but students can be busy sometimes. Thank you for your question and any questions. I appreciated your attention and your attendance.
feature or to, well, background is I tried it now
Yeah.
and when installing it pulled in a large part of JDT as a human patch version.
There's a short disclaimer on those update sites. It will actually patch your JDT core and JDT UI package because it depends on minor changes. The plan obviously is to bring those minor changes into those packages, so no feature patch required anymore. Long-term plan is to bring the whole concept into the Eclipse JDT core implementation. Would be nice.
Couldn't you say that the actual underlying problem is language itself? So if you didn't use language that is as verbose as Java is, you wouldn't have to deal with this problem at all.
Could you provide an example in which language this problem doesn't exist? So the initial problem was that we unintentionally have to reposition the cursor a lot while we code. This is the initial problem, which this tries to solve. So this problem also exists for C#, it also exists for PHP, for example, or even C or C++.
Yeah, that's true. No, I mean, if you do a large completion, as you just showed,
yeah.
Then what you actually do is that you replace a sort of short string by a very large boilerplate
yeah.
kind of code. And if you didn't have to write that boilerplate kind of code to begin with, you wouldn't need the feature. I mean, of course, it is useful because Java is there.
Yeah, we can't change the syntax, right?
Exactly.
We can't inject the sort method directly into the list interface. That's not possible. So this is a workaround, and it should be time-saving.
Okay. So my question, like more for the future, would be: could you think of applications for this even in languages which are like less verbose than Java?
I also thought about an implementation for SQL editors. Even for those, it would be a valid concept to implement. But actually, I do not plan to implement it for SQL editors. But I stick to Java and I like Eclipse, so maybe for CDT. Other questions?
Have you thought about getting this stuff into code recommenders, which you mentioned earlier?
Are you from Code Recommenders?
Yes.
I installed the latest Code Recommenders version, and it broke some parts of my editor.
I think we should talk.
We should talk. Yeah, it would be great, of course, if it would come into Code Recommenders, of course, yeah. We can talk later. Other questions? You have to ask at least one question, Lars.
Just as a comment, I think it's awesome, this development, and we are already trying to bring it into JDT, so also patch merge, which was for Nico, to get it JDT UI ready, and I think actually this is just awesome. But, so it's not a question, sorry.
Cost you a beer later. Other questions? Thank you.